being lousy at just about everything. I decided to polish my skills by transferring to a regional office. Without you here, I won't have to clean up your messes anymore. Thanks. That's what my snarky colleague said as he saw me off. Yet years later, when I returned to the headquarters, I was faced with the unavoidable reality of that same snarky colleague becoming my boss. What, you're back? You'll regret it. I didn't understand what he meant until I found myself surrounded by men in dark suits at a welcome party I was called to. So this is what regret looks like. In sheer desperation, I looked up to the sky. My name is Kyle Johnson. Below average in everything I do. I couldn't even like myself. Even with all my efforts, I could barely achieve mediocrity, and I hated that I couldn't be more. My mother, Madison Johnson, was often sick, and I didn't spend much time with her when I was little. The one who filled the loneliness of not having my mother around was the helper, Olivia Adams. Olivia had a daughter a year older than me, Hannah, and by the time I was conscious of my surroundings, we were always together. We held hands and went to the park, or stayed inside playing games and watching TV. They were like family to me. Maybe because I took after my mother. I was frail, and during my early elementary years, I often fell. Then a black sedan would come to pick me up. The tough-looking men who came for me were a topic of whispered gossip among my classmates. Given my parents' somewhat unusual job, I just accepted it. But every time Hannah would scold them, gossiping is what cowards do. If you have something to say it clearly. Rumors spread among classmates that I'd be beaten up and taken away in the black car one day, and I was treated like a pariah, with no friends but Hannah. As I got a bit stronger, I started taking boxing classes owned by a friend of my father's. But it seemed I didn't like fighting. The thought of hurting someone with a move made it hard for me to act, and I didn't improve. Meanwhile, Hannah excelled rapidly, eventually winning competitions. Kyle, I'll be your bodyguard, Hannah always said, staying close to me. What was different between Hannah and me? I couldn't figure it out, and always just accepted the situation. If only it were the other way around. I often thought, believing my father would have been happier. Each time I thought this, my loneliness deepened. Many adults associated with the family business referred to me affectionately as young master. My father, Tyler Johnson, always looked intimidating, but his expression softened when he looked at me, saying, "Kyle, come here." He'd sit me on his lap and listen to my stories about school. I loved these moments. However, having no friends, I had little to talk about, and each time my father would look sad. Feeling sorry for my father, yet also feeling like I wish I hadn't been born into this family. Those thoughts always mixed in my mind. I didn't want to see my father's sad face, so even when it wasn't true, I'd force a smile and say, "School's fun." I cherished the little time I could spend with my father. Even someone like me was needed and loved by him. Yes, I often thought of myself in a self-deprecating way. Whether she knew how I felt or not, Olivia would tell me, "It's because of you, young master, that everyone from your father and mother to the people in this house can keep going. You are everyone's hope." Each time she said this, my heart would brighten and I would smile. Seeing this, Olivia would pat my head. Meanwhile, Hannah would always say, "How long are you going to keep that gloomy look? Stop moping around. Really, Kyle, you can be so hopeless." But even when she scolded me, she was always there to encourage and stay by my side. The Adams family became a significant presence in my life. My mother, weakened by illness, felt frustrated that she couldn't be by my side, but she was able to pursue treatment because she entrusted everything to Olivia Adams. As soon as there was even a slight improvement in her condition, she would call me over and say, "I'm sorry, Kyle. I'm always not able to be by your side," looking at me with a sense of guilt. "It's okay. Olivia is here too. You just focus on getting better," I would say, and she would pat my head and smile. "Thank you, Kyle. You're such a kind child." Although we spent little time together, being with my mother always brought me a sense of peace. I think I managed to get by even without friends because I had my family. I've never been the proactive type, more on the passive side. Because of my family's situation, I made sure not to stand out. So I never raised my hand to speak up. And in class, I avoided making eye contact with the teacher so I wouldn't be called on. Maybe that's backfired on me. I often couldn't perform even average tasks. During my school days, there were teachers who understood me even if I couldn't perform at an average level and appreciated the effort I put in. But that doesn't work in the professional world. Everything is focused on results and achievements, which made it incredibly difficult for me, and I couldn't keep up with the gap between myself and others. The company I joined was founded by Derek Adams, a subordinate of my father. My father probably wanted me to take over his legacy. Leaving our hometown wasn't allowed. I was disappointed because I thought that becoming an adult meant moving out and being free from parental constraints. The company's CEO, Derek Adams, was also the husband of the helper, Olivia Adams. Derek fell in love with Olivia at first sight when she was helping at our house, pursued her relentlessly, and finally won her over. Olivia quit her helper role to manage the home when the company started, passing her duties to Hannah. Though still a young company, it had grown rapidly enough to establish branches in the regions. I joined this company and was determined to do my best. My colleagues who joined at the same time were all competent, quick with their work. They were far too superior compared to me, which only led me to loathe my own incompetence. Everyone was highly competitive, willing to knock down others to be the best, which made me all the more timid. No matter how desperately I tried to catch up, the fundamental difference in skills meant I couldn't, and I just became a burden. I spent my days amidst this struggle. I was trying my hardest, but the things I couldn't do outnumbered the things I could. Can't you do even this quickly? Are you really my coworker? Ethan would berate me. Whenever I rushed, I just spun my wheels, and my mistakes only increased. You really are useless. Always making mistakes. Think about the burden you place on me having to clean up after you. He would snap at me. I'm sorry, I'd say, and he'd retort, forget it, I'll do it, and take over the work. All I could do was watch Ethan work, as I kept making mistakes. Mr. Adams was kept informed of the situation, but since he had instructed not to give me any special treatment, he just continued to observe. Indeed, Ethan was excellent, respected among our peers. Perhaps Mr. Adams couldn't afford to let such a talented individual leave. As much as I tried to handle my job, I was always worried I might make another mistake. Since Ethan was outstanding at his work, he would look at me and say, "You really aren't cut out for this job, are you? When will you be able to work without mistakes?" His words stinging. "Take it easy, Ethan." His peers would chide him, but their looks towards me were mocking. Thus, there was no way we could get along, becoming almost like oil and water, always causing trouble for others. My work never matched the effort I put in. This couldn't continue, though I wanted to be able to perform as well as others. Work at headquarters was hectic, and I was too exhausted to study when I got home. I just couldn't find a time to study. What should I do? Then, desperate for a solution, I decided that transferring to a branch rumored to have more breathing room to dedicate time to study and improve my skills was the answer. I approached Mr. Adams. If things continue this way, I will only cause trouble for my department, so I would like to transfer to a regional branch to refine my skills. I apologize for my selfish request, but please allow me to transfer. Young master, that's something we agreed not to say. Indeed, I know you're trying hard. If you're set on it, go ahead and work hard at the branch office to sharpen your skills. But remember, it's only for a limited time. He agreed readily. When Ethan heard I was transferring from headquarters to a regional branch, he said with a sneering smile, "So, you're moving to the regional branch, huh? Well, with your work performance, it's no surprise. Finally gave up on working at the headquarters, did you? Well, if you're gone, I won't have to clean up after you. It'll make my work easier, killing two birds with one stone. Thanks. Why don't you just stay out there?" I felt angry at Ethan's sarcasm, but as always, being prone to self-deprecation, I had no comeback. Instead, I thought maybe he was right, and all I could do was reflect on my past self. "Well, take care then." As Ethan mockingly saw me off, I replied, "You too," and began preparing for my move to the regional office. While other colleagues kept their distance and whispered among themselves, I, undeterred, vowed to do my best at the new branch. When I told my parents about the transfer to the branch, my father said, "You can't handle household chores on your own, can you? Can you really improve your skills like that?" "Don't worry, I'll manage somehow. But he responded, your somehow is always iffy. Just take Adams with you. Unable to defy my father's firm stance, my hope of enjoying living alone was easily shattered. Well, I've known Kyle since he was little, and I'll take care of the household stuff so he can focus on his work, Hannah said with a somewhat haughty attitude. I have always been indebted to Hannah, partly because she always defended me when we were kids. Please, I appreciate it, I greeted Hannah. Leave it to me. Hannah moved into an apartment in the same building as mine. Though we were practically siblings, the idea of a young man and woman living together was something else, so I was relieved. She said, what are you worried about now? I have my reasons, after all. We discussed and set specific times when it was okay for her to use a spare key to come and go as she pleased for doing household chores in my apartment. While Hannah's homemaking skills might not match those of her mother, Olivia, they were still high, and her movements were efficient without any waste. I was impressed when I saw this. I was impressed and asked, how can you do things so efficiently without any waste? I used to practice boxing, so I'm always thinking about what the opponent will do next. Trying to predict too far ahead can get you in trouble, so I focus on the next move. That way, I can read the flow and understand what to do next. It's the same with housework. If you think about what to do next, you'll see how best to move, she explained. Despite being a helper, she casually uses my first name. I couldn't tell Hannah to not call me by my first name now, and having someone who does treat me informally was precious to me. I think Hannah's assertiveness comes from her boxing background. After all, she was a national champion. It was strange that Hannah, taking over from Olivia, worked as a helper in my house. I would learn the reason for this later on. Following Hannah's advice to plan my next moves at work, I gradually managed to handle my tasks. Initially, I rushed and made mistakes, but gradually my movements became smoother. Unlike when I was at headquarters, always thinking on my feet allowed me to prioritize tasks and judge what I could handle. Still, even with all this effort, I was just about managing average, far from truly achieving results. That was frustrating beyond words. My regional manager said, Kyle, you've been making fewer mistakes lately, and your movements have improved. But for me, the current state is far from satisfactory, without real results. I want to achieve much more. This dilemma continued. Hannah said, I think everyone has things they're not suited for. Maybe if you changed departments within the company, you'd find something more fitting. After all, Kyle, you're not good at competing with others, so maybe that's why you're not seeing results. I'm sure there's something else out there for you. Being encouraged made me feel even more inadequate, and her words painfully struck a chord. At the branch, I managed to perform at an average level, but I still couldn't achieve noteworthy results. Despite all my efforts, I wondered why things weren't going as I hoped, feeling increasingly anxious. As time passed, the deadline for my transfer at the branch was approaching. Though still uncertain, I decided to try my best back at headquarters from scratch. One evening, as the day to return to headquarters neared, I received a phone call from Ethan. You're still there. I heard you're coming back to headquarters. I came here on a time limit. It's just time to go back. What can someone incompetent like you do? Just stay there. That's why I'm going back, because the time's up. If you come back to headquarters, you'll regret it. Are you sure that's what you want? With that, the call ended. What a rude guy, calling me incompetent. He's always belittled me, and it infuriates me. I'm just doing as I was told and returning. What's there to regret? He makes no sense. When I returned to the headquarters, several bosses welcomed me. Did you manage to grow a bit while at the branch? I heard you've been working hard. Despite trying, I hadn't grown as much as I'd hoped. I didn't know what to answer. This guy hasn't made any progress, has he? That's why he can't answer, right? Among the bosses, there was Ethan. Why is he here? I wondered, but during my absence, Ethan had been promoted to department head. I later heard that the other colleagues from my cohort had already left the company. They had been forced out or had their achievements stolen by Ethan's schemes. Ethan had been obsequious to the bosses, who apparently hadn't seen through him. They mentioned there would be a welcome party for me, so I decided to head to the venue ahead of time. However, just as I left the company, Ethan said, You came back even though I warned you you'd regret it. I'll make you realize your mistake." Around him, about 10 men in black suits, who looked like they were from the mafia, appeared. "Resign now or sink in the sea. Depending on your answer, I might reconsider." "What is he talking about? What does he want to do to me? It seems you have no answer." "Well, let's have you sink in the sea then." At that moment, the men in black suits surrounded me. One of them said, "Wait, isn't this the young master? You're back. What are you guys here?" "Well, there's a bit of a situation," they replied. "Many may not realize, but I am the son of the boss of the Johnson family." These men in black suits had become completely harmless in my presence. Meanwhile, Ethan was confused, knowing I had connections within the mafia. "You guys, I'm paying you, so just take him down," he commanded. That's when it happened. "What do you think you're doing to Kyle? You won't get away with this for free." From somewhere, a voice shouted. In the next moment, the mafia members were knocked down. It was Hannah. "Don't you dare lay a hand on Kyle again." With a stern look at Ethan, Hannah said this. The mafia members of the Johnson family, ready to pounce on Ethan at any moment, scared him off. "Kyle, I'm glad you're safe." Hannah grinned triumphantly. "Young master, I'm glad you're safe. Welcome back." The other mafia members also said this and greeted me. Being born into this family meant I hadn't made many friends, but the family members always helped someone like me. Calling me young master, they also showed their affection for me. This was the first time I felt grateful for being born into this family. Although I was greeted with smiles and welcomed back, I couldn't help but wonder if I really deserved such a greeting. Not having fully come into my own yet, I felt embarrassed by my own inability to do anything but be protected. Father, the Martinez family, the Taylor family, and the Anderson family members were among those who attacked earlier. "What the hell?" Hannah reported the incident to her father, Mr. Adams. There had been some unaccounted funds recently in the company, and Mr. Adams, along with other bosses, had been monitoring Ethan. Ethan was summoned by Mr. Adams. "Who were you trying to have attacked? You may not realize it, but I've got evidence that you've been embezzling company funds in collaboration with the mafia families." "What? No, that's not true." Ethan tried desperately to make excuses, but when confronted with photos and documents as evidence, he slumped in defeat. "Either return the money and quit the company, or sink in the sea. Choose one," I said in a stern voice. Ethan went pale and trembled as he said, "I'll return it." He was made to sign the documents on the spot. "Understand this, if you try to run, you should be ready for what will happen to your family," Mr. Adams said with a sneer. Ethan looked like a deer in headlights. I later heard that he couldn't escape the company, had no chance to see his family, and was working day and night to repay the money. This news also reached my father's ears. "Adams, what are you putting Kyle through?" Mr. Adams was scolded. My father had always been doting since I was young. Because I was frail as a child, he had tried every possible means to shield me from harm, feeling it was because I was incapable. "Boss, I apologize." Mr. Adams apologized but continued undaunted. "Indeed, this situation was due to my negligence. It was fortunate Hannah reported it so it didn't turn into a bigger issue. However, the young master is an adult now. If the boss handles everything for him, when the time comes, he won't be able to do anything on his own. We won't always be around. Isn't it also a parent's duty to let their children grow up, considering they will have to stand on their own eventually?" Initially outraged, my father seemed to have a realization. "Please continue to look after Kyle," he said. I was unaware of such exchanges between them. "Why such a gloomy face?" Hannah asked. "I'm always just being helped by everyone." "Kyle, that's always how it is with you, right? You think it's normal to be helped. I think your father is too protective. Sure, your mom has been sick, and you were weak. So as a parent, he wanted to do anything to help. But is that really for the best? It's you who will struggle later. Weren't you struggling at work too? That's because you never take the initiative. You're always passive. Shouldn't you start changing that bit by bit?" Hannah. Looking me straight in the eye, Hannah spoke. I couldn't meet her gaze. She had been watching over me since we were kids, always by my side, always helping me with a wry smile, saying, Such a helpless guy. She didn't just help. She taught me the do's and don'ts, pushing me forward. Really, you have always been a weak link. A weak link. And haven't you ever thought about why I stay by your side? Huh? I couldn't quite grasp what Hannah meant. I just somehow sensed her face turning red. Well, never mind. You better think about what you want to do next. Yeah. When I went to the company, I learned that Ethan had quit. I think I wanted to be recognized as a valuable asset after having improved my skills at the branch. But feeling unable and embarrassed that I hadn't achieved as much was frustrating. Why did I even ask for a transfer? That thought began to consume me. Always shielded by someone. Always having my family resolve any troubles. I was ashamed of myself. Ashamed of my persistent inadequacy despite my efforts, and of being too dependent on others. Why am I always like this? Every time I thought this, Hannah's words painfully resonated with me. Think about what you want to do next. Each time I tried to think positively, I found myself unable to act. Gradually, I found myself drifting away from the company. Seeing my listless demeanor, both my parents and the family members tried to encourage me, but their encouragement felt like rubbing salt in my wounds. Kyle, how long are you going to keep this up? Hannah said to me as I was taking time off from work. It doesn't matter, I'm just a nobody. At that moment, Hannah slapped me hard on the cheek. Don't you realize how many people are worried about you just because they care? I never asked anyone to worry about me. It's always the same. I wish you would just leave me alone. You're just helping me stay helpless. Kyle, you say that, but you never try to do anything yourself, do you? Didn't I tell you before? You need to take action. What were you listening to? I'm just ignorant and incapable. I can't do anything. That's exactly it. Kyle, you're just making excuses to ease your own conscience. You're just pampering yourself. You always give up before you even start. You quit after a failure and don't try again. You don't even try to listen to what others have to say. And you give up on yourself. You think you've done enough after just a little effort. Have you ever worked until you spit blood? No, right. It's all superficial. If you give up, you'll never move forward. If today was bad, just try harder tomorrow. The important thing is to keep that effort going. Isn't that what you're lacking right now, Kyle? I couldn't argue with what Hannah was saying. I thought that this is who I am now. Kyle, do you remember? Remember what? When you were little, on my birthday, you gave me a dandelion necklace. Hannah, hold out your hands. It's pretty, isn't it? You said, and handed me a box with a ribbon. Inside was a hair tie. It was the first time a boy gave me a present and said it was pretty. I was so happy, and I thought I wanted to protect this smile forever. That feeling hasn't changed at all. That's why I stayed by your side. No matter how much of a weakling you were the first boy I ever loved. Hannah, it's funny, right? No matter what I see in you, I can't dislike you. To me, you're still that little boy. Remember when you started boxing and couldn't compete because you hated hurting others? I thought that was kind. I've always thought that maybe you and I were born the wrong genders. I was jealous of you. I want to be by your side no matter what. I want to do anything I can for you. I guess I'm overprotective too. Hannah laughed. She felt the same way. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I couldn't help it. Hannah hugged me and said, "You're not worthless, Kyle. You are irreplaceable." I hugged Hannah tightly. Is it really okay to be such a weakling like me? Yet she says it's okay. Time just passed without either of us saying anything. After a while, we looked at each other. Hannah looked a bit shy. Thank you, I'll try again. Hannah nodded affirmatively. I still make mistakes every day, but I don't get discouraged because I try to succeed. I will try and I can try are different. I will try is a motto before starting something, and I can try is something you can say because you haven't given up along the way. I want to be a man who can keep trying. Even if it's difficult, I think there's nothing I can't do. If you get used to giving up halfway, you develop a habit of giving up, and everything ends up half done. If you manage to achieve something through sheer effort, it surely builds confidence and leads to the next step. I've been thinking and experimenting a lot, but without these processes, I wouldn't have developed a never give up attitude. Since childhood, I've had Hannah by my side, scolding and encouraging me. Since that day, the distance between Hannah and me has closed. Initially, I saw her as a sister, but every time I caught a glimpse of her feminine side, my heart would skip a beat. Maybe I've always cared about Hannah since the day I first gave her a present as a child. The first and only time I ever said pretty or beautiful to a woman was about Hannah. I feel so indebted to Hannah. Misconceptions are scary. Sometimes they make you lose sight of yourself. Carried away by the words of those around you, you tend to give up before even trying. Since I must have strengths of my own, I want to gain various experiences to find them and never throw myself away. This too, I feel, is something I learned from Hannah. Hannah has always cared for me and kept her feelings for me. Someday that feeling will come true, and inside that box with a ribbon, there will be a ring symbolizing a promise to walk through life together. Hannah, let's walk together forever, until our hair turns gray.